2021. Madam City Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilmembers Huff.
Here.
Perkins.
Here.
Stewart.
Here.
DeLucy.
Here.
Steinmeier.
Here.
Hobart.
Here.
Mayor Weir.
Here. As usual, we will have citizen requests. We didn't have anybody sign up to speak to the council in advance. We will be having a full public hearing if you are here to speak about the potential increased utility costs and remedies. But as we do every regular meeting, if there's any citizen who requests to speak to the council on any other topic, please feel free to come forward. Okay, seeing none, we will proceed with our presentation. Mr. City Manager.
Yes, good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. This evening we have prepared a presentation at the request of the council regarding IPL winter storm preparations. I sent a communication to the council a couple of weeks ago that contained information from our Southwest Power Pool energy group that communicated that we may be experiencing some costs increase associated with forecasted winter temperatures again this year, and council has asked us to give a presentation tonight to discuss more about that, and then of course the corresponding public hearing. So we'll start with Mr. Nail, who has prepared a short presentation for you.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. As city manager said a couple of weeks ago, we put out a kind of a public advisory both to city officials and to the public, alerting them that our partners in the energy business have forecasted that there are some forecasts that call for a severe winter and the associated costs that would come with that. Of course, that reminded all of us that last February we saw some very unusual winter weather, prolonged polar temperatures, and it resulted in some unprecedented surges in both gas and electricity prices. IPL has been asked to review what happened, what are some of the lessons learned, and what steps have we taken as a result of that. So I think probably the first thing to do is to start off with just a discussion of what happened back in February of 21. There were a number of investigations, surveys, reviews that were done at the federal level by FERC through the NERC agency, regionally through groups like Southwest Power Pool, the Energy Market of Texas, and others that were involved in this. A lot of those results were kind of pooled together, and then some presentations were made. Some of these notes today are from a presentation that was put together by Southwest Power Pool, kind of combining some of those different survey answers. One of the things we saw was largest outages were caused by generator freezing. Utilities that failed to prepare for the deep cold, their units were not available as expected. Anything from frozen instrumentation, frozen turbine blades, frozen piping, but the largest single cause for outages was that freezing due to the prolonged cold temperatures. The second largest cause was the natural gas problem that emerged. During that, with those prolonged temperatures, a natural gas field, what comes out of the ground is a mixture of gas, oil, and water. And if they failed to insulate their piping or not have heat protection on that piping, when that slurry came out of the ground and hit those very, very cold valves, piping, distribution lines, it froze up. So it blocked some of the distribution. Out in the rest of the natural gas distribution system, the gas doesn't just flow, it has to be pushed. So there's a number of very large compressors. The ones in the south experienced freezing problems in their compressors, and that reduced the amount of gas that was available to be distributed throughout the country. Across the Midwest, gas supplies were down by about 20%. In Texas alone, it dropped by 30%, primarily due to these freezing issues. When the natural gas supply went down, it's not regulated. SPP, FERC, NERC, they don't regulate the gas industry. So when the supply went down, the prices went up, and they went up dramatically. Here you can see the impact that they had. 357 different gas-fired generators had fuel supply problems that limited or eliminated their production. You can see the impact of where the worst of it was, because out of that 357, 185 of those were in Texas. 141 across Southwest Power Pool, mostly the southern parts of Southwest Power Pool. Up in MISO, which is the Midwest Independent System Operator, they primarily have the Great Lakes region and the upper Midwest. MISO had 31. So you can see the folks that are used to dealing with winter had much less impact than when you get down into our southern states that got hit pretty hard.
Mr. Nail, can I ask you, can you tell me how much we had in Missouri? Can you?
No, I don't know that. I don't have that
Okay.
number.
Thanks.
Some of the other things that contributed to the problem, the natural gas and electric dependency. A good portion of our electric generation across the country is still being supplied by natural gas. Coal has fallen to second to natural gas, and wind is ever increasing amount of the production. But the natural gas generators, such as Dogwood, those are a very important piece of our generation puzzle. This is most natural gas production, the facility losses due to weather-related power, or firm load shedding, and I'll get to load shedding in a minute, but that also caused a problem. 60% of the units affected by that natural gas supply, they had already had other outages from this cold weather before they lost their fuel. So there were multiple issues going on, not just the gas supply. In Texas, firm load shedding was one of the problems. They actually tripped off some of their own gas fields by cutting the power. Within NERC, the NERC regulations, we have to have several different load shedding schemes. There's manual load shedding, where, like in this case, SPP called us and said, you need to shed however much, 10 megawatts. And then we go in and we select circuits to drop, and we've studied beforehand which ones we're going to target to achieve that reduction. Then there's automatic load shedding, which when the frequency and the voltage in the system is going away faster than operators can take care of it, we have automatic schemes that will go in and trip large chunks of the grid to help protect the rest of it from crashing. The problem with the manual load shedding is if you haven't coordinated it, if you haven't paid attention to what is on those circuits, then you end up with what Texas had, where they actually made the problem worse by tripping off the power to some of their gas distribution facilities. Note here, rotating outages were difficult to manage in ERCOT due to the magnitude. They had so much that they had to shed that it got difficult to try to, how do we rotate if we already have shed all that we can shed? And then that's where they ran the risk of having some of the automatic tripping take place. Here in Southwest Power Pool, it went rather smoothly. All the individual utilities within Southwest Power Pool shared in that rotating outage. We were able to manage it on a short-term basis. We targeted 30 minutes per section here in Independence. Kansas City Power and Light, Evergy, they used like 45 minutes to an hour. And then there were, depending on other things that happened at the same time, some of those outages ended up lasting longer, but for the most part, we were able to manage that rotation and spread that out so it impacted people for as little a time as possible. Event-wide unplanned outages was another issue. Across the grid, all of our operators have to schedule the availability of their units. We tell SPP, here's the units we have, here's when they're available, here's the conditions under which we want to run them, but they are available. If we want to take a unit out of that system, we have to request an outage, a planned outage. SPP will then look at what the forecasted loads are and make the decision as to whether those units can be spared or not, and allow or schedule those outages. What happened was all the unscheduled outages that hit during that extreme cold weather. here you see the numbers. Generator outages in the 3 regions resulted in over 1,000 individual generators that were supposed to be running and either couldn't run or ran at less than their forecasted capacity. Altogether, 4,124 total generator outages across the country. 604 of those were for natural gas. So you can see it wasn't just a natural gas problem. Wind farms were shut down or failed to run because of icing. Even coal plants had problems due to water supplies freezing. The coal pile itself actually freezes into a giant block, and you have to get extra equipment out there to break it up and be able to feed it into your boilers. The diesel systems had freezing issues. So across all the different generation sectors, these outages happen. You can see there they've broken down the cause. The 75% of it was either freezing or fuel supply issues, and then you see the other causes there below that. So some of the conclusions, what does all that mean? First of all, one of the biggest impacts on this for this outage was, or the cascading outages, the rotating outages, was the lack of generation. And generation availability was a key part of that. So some of the things that you have to do, look at better coordination on the planned outages. We have a term they use called resource adequacy, looking at the forecast, looking at what the situation is going to be, trying to forecast out what the weather is going to be. SPP sets some threshold of generation that has to be available. That doesn't mean they're going to call on you, but they want to make sure that generation is available if needed. Typically, the highest amount of availability we maintain is during the summer. When everyone's running their air conditioning, the loads are the highest, and we have the most generation that's on standby. During the fall and spring, and even in winter, SPP will allow more units in planned outages so they can get those maintenance done prior to the next peak. In this case, SPP, one of the analysis was maybe for the deep part of winter, we should plan on a little more generation. So increase that adequacy level to make sure that more generation is available or at least scheduled. Another big issue was winterization. And as you saw from the numbers, the largest impact of that was in the south, but there were units here in the Midwest and up even further north that had winterization problems. There's a number of things you can do. Insulate your piping. Put heat trace, that's basically wires that you string along the piping to generate some heat and keep it warm. There's recirculation of different fluid systems. In our case, our diesel generators, the real issue we have would be one with having the diesel fuel gel up in the lines, and we actually did see that happen during the deep cold in February. So some of the things that we've done, one is we routinely go in and inspect that heat tape to make sure that the circuits are energized and working, that we have adequate insulation on our pipings. With the deep cold that we had, even that wasn't enough. So we've taken an additional step that we're going to maintain. Normally, we maintain about 50% of the tank capacity for our diesel fuel. We're going to, before winter sets in, we'll up that to 75%. And if we see an extended cold spell like we saw last year, we'll raise that to 90% of tank capacity, but we're going to do it with number 1 diesel. Number 2 diesel is what we typically use. It's cheaper, but number 1 is thinner, so it'll help protect the fuel lines from having that freezing problem. Fuel supplies, obviously one of the concerns from last winter is making sure that you have supplies of fuel. For us, we had to scramble to maintain enough diesel to keep those CTs running. We had one contract. We had other companies that we were familiar with, but we had one pricing agreement for diesel. Now we've reached out and we've got multiple companies that we're working with that we can go out and check who's available, who can deliver today, who can deliver till next week. Can we wait till next week if they're cheaper? But we've increased our number of suppliers so that we can have more flexibility. And as I mentioned on the winterization part, we're going to increase, instead of having 50 to 60% of our tank capacity, we'll increase that to up to 90 if it looks like the we'll have an extended cold spell. Market coordination, market resource officers, that really refers to how SPP manages the generation in the system. All of the participants, we do an annual forecast of what our load is going to be, and that's how we determine the capacity requirement that we have. But on a weekly basis, we do a 7-day forecast of what our expected load is. It's based on a number of different factors, including several different weather forecasts that we subscribe to. And then every day we do a day ahead forecast that's a little bit more fine-tuned than the week out. Southwest Power Pool uses that information to forecast what generation they're going to need and who to schedule, who to allow to be off, and to make sure that that coordination takes place. Again, we do update that forecast daily with SPP. And if we have a significant change that occurs during the day, we send an update to SPP so they know exactly what our conditions are. Allows them the flexibility to do the best planning that they can. Another big recommendation out of these surveys was to maintain a diverse generation portfolio. We do that here with Independence. We have solar, we have wind, we have diesel, we have gas, we have contracts with coal plants. And SPP certainly, on a regional level, SPP does the same. They have generation of lots of different types, including nuclear and hydro. So they've got a very diverse. That way, hopefully, any issue that pops up won't affect all of those different market areas at the same time. And as one particular area gets hit, you can shift your generation to areas that weren't. And again, as I said, here in Independence, we've maintained a diverse portfolio ourselves of what we have, different resources available.
Mr. Nell?
Yes, sir.
Just a quick question. Solar, wind, we buy energy from SPP primarily, right?
We buy all of our energy from SPP.
Okay, so how much does solar and wind account for their generation?
It varies day to day. They've had as much on a given hour, they've had as much as over 73% on a given hour, but that fluctuates quite broadly.
What's the average, though?
I'll have to ask for that number.
If I
don't have
remember,
it.
you gave us something when we talked about this after the winter storm, and if I remember right, it's somewhere on average, because nuclear was like real low and some of the others, but wind and solar was around 36%. Does that sound on
I think
average?
if on an annual average, that may be. I'll have to verify that. I don't know.
Yeah, I tried to find it, what you'd sent out or how I got that, but I do remember that was the number. So if we can agree that's close, we'll come back to it, okay?
Now, in the winter event itself, wind dropped to only about 5% output, but they were only projected to have 3 to 4, so they actually did better than they thought.
Yeah, but those froze up.
Which is what? But they still had 5%, which was more than they were counting on.
But when you're counting, that was the high, but if I remember right, that was the highest out of their portfolio, their energy generation. And when you lose your highest from 36 to 5 or 3 or 0, that's what I want to address. But go ahead.
Yes, but that's exactly why the diverse portfolio. That's why that's important, because under different circumstances, all the different types of generation are going to have an issue. Hydro is very dependable unless you have a drought and your reservoir level drops, and then you have to cut back that. So there's different circumstances that will impact all of them. So the more diverse you have, the better prepared you are.
What I want to discuss in a little bit is the cost, why costs go up when you lose a big chunk of your generation. So I understand the reliability. I don't think it's that reliable, but go ahead. We'll go on from here.
So I just want to make sure that we're clear on this few numbers that are being talked about. So on an annualized basis, let's just use the number 36%. That might be close to what, over the course of a year, the average is for the wind and solar. But if I understand what you were saying is, for that particular day, the wind and solar was projected to be 3 or 4%, and it actually was 5 for that period, that particular day or those series of a
Correct.
couple of days. So it wasn't projected to be 36% those days. It was projected to be like 3 or 4%. Is that, am I saying that correctly?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
And again, looking at the wind forecast, seeing how the wind is trending across the Midwest, they can tell pretty well, pretty accurately how much the wind. Sometimes they're off by when it starts to die or when it starts to come up, but the amount that's going to be there, they're pretty good at forecasting that.
Okay, thank you.
And in this case, they weren't counting on it. Environmental constraints, one of the recommendations was that generation owners reach out to the regulators and get relief from some of the pollution limits so that they could do 100% if available. That really doesn't impact us. Our units, our CTs, we don't have a limit that we're gonna hit just because we go at 100% compared to 50%. But some of the coal units, some of the gas units that have special environmental controls on them, it does limit how much power they can generate under certain conditions. So that was one of the recommendations, was to look at those environmental issues. And then the final one in the study was the load shedding. Make sure that when you're going to drop a circuit, make sure you know who's on that circuit and that you're not going to make the situation worse. And we have been reviewing our load shedding plan all through the summer and fall. I think we're just getting ready here soon to release an update, which would help us make sure that we know who we're dropping for any given circuit at one time. Now, some of the other strategies that you may hear about, one is fuel contracts. It is possible to go out and buy bulk fuel contracts. One of our problems on the diesel side is our tanks are only so big, so we can only fill the tanks as full as we've got capacity for, and then see if we can arrange contracts for updated deliveries to keep as we use it. For natural gas, there's also bulk contracts. One that I did find an example of was a company, a large municipal utility that probably burns more gas in a week than we do all year. They went out on a contract to guarantee to lock in a price, and it's like insurance. It's not a bargain price, but it's a steady price. Their agreement across an entire year, they agreed to pay $5.15 for gas when the market rate was $2.50. So month to month, they doubled their fuel cost just in case they got hit with something catastrophic later in the year. That's a big gamble. And with the amount of gas that we burn, that's probably not an acceptable gamble. The Missouri Joint Utility Commission, MUJIMUC, who's one of our partners through the Missouri Public Utility Alliance, they've done a hedging contract for 10 years and they've lost money every year. They've guessed wrong 10 years in a row. But they were trying to balance fuel supplies for a collection of cooperatives, again, larger volume than what we typically would use. The problems for us, one is the amount. We just don't burn that much gas compared to what these suppliers are interested in contracting for. The other problem is it's not just a price. It's an amount of gas per set blocks of time. And if we go through a month and we rarely get called on by SPP because we don't schedule our own generation, if we don't get called on, we still buy that gas at that higher price. We can try to sell it and try to minimize our losses, but you lock in your price and a volume over that specified period of time. So for our operation, considering that we don't schedule our units and we do have the availability of switching from gas to diesel, we just didn't evaluate that as a smart move for our ratepayers' resources. With the on the electric side, you can also do some block contracts for electric power. Now it's not like buying bulk fuel and then saving it, because energy doesn't work that way. You have to use it when you produce it, or have some storage medium like batteries that we don't have yet, reservoirs that can store the water, some other means of storing that energy so that you can use it later. Typically what it is again, you are locking in a price for a block of energy over a set period of time. For instance, we maybe think we get a good deal for 100 megawatt hours between noon and 4 p.m. So for a week, we're going to contract to get that energy at a set price during that specific period. Again, if your demand goes down, if you don't need that power, you're already locked into buying it. So then you'd have to turn around and try to sell it elsewhere. Again, typically those contracts are in large blocks of energy, far more than what Independence uses. In our case, we do have a volume advantage, and that's through the Southwest Power Pool integrated market. As was mentioned earlier, we purchase all of our energy from Southwest Power Pool. They are able to look across the entire region, schedule the lowest cost options that they've got available. We look at those outage plans, we look at our weather forecasts, we look at our load forecasts, and SPP uses that to proactively schedule the cheapest units they can, also taking into consideration some of the other requirements that they have to meet. We then get to purchase that energy from Southwest Power Pool at that low average cost. Now, we don't have this problem, doesn't impact us with SPP, but on some of those other contracts, if you're out in the market and you're speculating on power and you're trying to buy in some contracts, they've learned some lessons since last year, and they hedge those with the gas index. So they may quote you $50, but it's linked to the gas index. If the gas index goes up a certain amount, so does the price you pay. So it's not really a contract as far as a set price.
Who's setting that index?
The gas suppliers.
And so their risk analysts are better than SPP's?
Well, Southwest Power Pool isn't in the gas market.
But you just said that they go through and they have a whole risk analysis as to where they're buying and how they're buying, and they're looking at the factors of what the cheapest form of energy will be. So I imagine part of their factor would be looking at the risk analysis in even how companies are buying gas, like the example you used at $5 or whatever it was, and it went down to $2. You know, if they have a chief risk officer, I'd probably say he may be looking for a job, because that's why you forecast and you have these indicators that they study and they watch. I mean, I can't imagine commodities like a Goldman that trades energy all the time setting out to lose money. In fact, they're going to make money. They'll make money this winter. That's my point, is that I got to imagine part of their SPP is looking at that risk analysis as well, but I wanted folks to hear how that index is set.
Well, except that Southwest Power Pool doesn't set those prices, we do.
I didn't say that they do. I'm saying, but they have to be looking at it, Jim, in order to know who to buy from, who's going to have the cheapest energy. Those are factors that they've got to be looking at.
We give those numbers to SPP. When we do our forecasts,
Yeah.
we say we're going to have CTH5 available next week at this price. SPP doesn't question that. They don't bargain with us. We make the offer at that price. And if it meets SPP's need, they schedule us at that price. So we're the ones, the utilities are the ones doing that analysis. We're setting the prices for our units based on what we see as the pricing that we have coming in.
Well, that's what I'm curious to hear. How are we determining our prices?
We have our gas, we get our gas from Spire. Well, Spire delivers it. We have a pipeline that transports it, and then we have a broker who actually provides the energy.
Okay, so there's a broker that's supplying, or that we're buying gas from.
And then we have contracts with them for delivery, but ours is, like I said, we don't have the large volume advantage that some of the other utilities do. So ours is pretty market price, and then that gas index.
So they basically just tell us the price and we say yes, no to it.
Well, I mean, we see the market indexes, and we know what the market index says. So it's not like they can just come in and double it on us.
Okay. All right, keep going.
Now here's just a couple of graphs that show this is the impact that being a member of the Southwest Power Pool had. On the left, prior to 2009, we did all of our own marketing. We went out, we scheduled our own units, we looked at where we thought we were going to be short, we would go out and work the market, trying to make deals, and it was costing us, you can see there, 2006, 75.89 per megawatt hour, 84 and a half. Once we joined, and SPP tried something else first. It was an energy imbalance service that helped. And then when they kicked off the full integrated market, you can see that for the last several years, we've been down in the 20s as our average cost of buying energy, rather than trying to go out and figure out the market on our own. The Southwest Power Pool integrated market has been a tremendous value to the SPP members that have participated.
And what do we have to pay them to be part of this? I mean, you're showing me what the prices went down. So what are we paying SPP to be a member of? What's their price?
The annual member fee, I'd have to look that up and get that back to you. The annual member fee is really not that high. Southwest Power Pool is a nonprofit organization. So they go in, schedule the power, and then whatever they come up with as that low average cost, that's the price they charge us for the energy that they sell us.
So how are they making their money if there's not very much membership? Them guys make a lot of money. I know quite a few of them. So is there a markup in that price of that $20 range, or are we paying membership?
There is a membership fee. It's not tremendous on a per member basis. Again, it's based on your scale. So the larger a utility you are, the higher your membership fee is going to be. I'll have to get back to you on what ours is.
Okay.
And then as far as forecasting our demand, it's pretty stable. This shows all the way back to 2016. You can see this is a graph of the daily load that we've had every summer. That's the high peak there across the top. The peaks in between are the winter peak, and you can see that the fall and spring, it's fairly consistent. We don't have a lot of change from year to year, mainly due to the fact that the bulk of our customers are residential, and people don't change their habits easily. So whatever energy they typically use, they're pretty much going to use pretty close to that next year and the year after and the year after. So you can see that when we forecast our demand to Southwest Power Pool, it's fairly predictable. And our goal is to be less than 5% difference between forecast and actual, and we've been there, so our folks are doing a pretty good job with that.
On that forecasting, so you said earlier that is day to day, and the furthest you got is a week.
We do an annual forecast as to what we think our peak load is going to be, and then week ahead we look at our daily load and what we forecast it's going to be based on the weather patterns and such, and then we update that again on a day ahead basis.
And is this the power dispatcher doing this? We used to have an energy coordinator. Do we just use power dispatching now? Is that who's forecasting?
Our system operators, we do have our system operations group does have some staff that help with that analysis, and then working with the system operators, they make that update to Southwest Power Pool.
Okay, thank you.
But it's a lot less complicated than it was when we were in the market trying to figure it out, fine tune it. Again, what started this whole discussion off 2 weeks ago was an advisory that came out from MPUA about winter energy costs. And I apologize if there was any confusion, but the advisory was about winter heating costs. Several different organizations put out the same message. Winter could be harsh this year. We could have some cold spells, and with natural gas prices being still elevated compared to last year, homeowners that heat with gas could experience some large increases in their heating bill. While the electric sector won't be totally unaffected, it's at a much less degree. The impact, and this is from Forbes magazine, and several others had the same estimate, People who use gas to heat their homes could have a large increase. Electric bills are expected to only be about 6% increase on average. And that would be more driven by having to use it more than would be because of prices going up. The recommendations that came with that should be familiar. They're the same ones that industry's been putting out for pretty much my lifetime. Take advantage of heat from the sun. Open your drapes, let it warm your house, close them at night to keep the heat in. If you've got drafty windows, fix it. You can put plastic sheeting over the windows. You can change out the weather stripping. My wife's a quilter, so she would hang quilts in the windows to stop the draft. But the drafty windows are a big part of the home energy loss. Adjust the temperature. Turn your thermostat. Every degree you turn down your thermostat saves you money on your heating bill. Schedule service for your heating system. Make sure it's operating as well as it should. Keep your fireplace damper closed if you're not using it. Large heat loss out of a residential building is through the chimney. Lower your water heating costs by turning down the temperature there. And this is a season where we see a lot of residents have some very big increases just due to holiday lighting. Go out and buy LEDs. You'll save yourself on your bill for that. So there are things that our residents can do to help manage their costs. The price of gas is one that we're all going to have to work with, but there are some steps that you can take to help manage your own costs, and that was the real point of the advisory 2 weeks ago. So there are some additional things that people can take advantage of. Here in Independence, we have a couple of different programs. iShare for some of our low-income residents. They can get some assistance on their utility bills. IRAP, the Independence Rate Assistance Program for our elderly residents. Both of those are managed through the Community Services League. And there's information on our website of how people can contact CSL and take advantage of those. iHelp is our own home energy loan program through Independence Power and Light, where we work with the credit union to help get a lower interest rate home loan for folks to do some energy upgrades to siding, those drafty windows. LIHEAP, Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program, that's a government program it's also available. And then in addition, we do offer rebates on energy efficient upgrades for your home. And there's information on our website on how to apply for those. Subject to your questions, that's our presentation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Nail. Are there comments or questions from the council?
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
so back to the energy costs are trending higher. We pulled this out of Forbes. Was this written by who? I mean, is this a energy expert? This a journalist? Is this, because I'm looking at this and I'm going, gosh, why are we even worried? I mean, 6%, come on. But when you see 22 to 94% more to create energy, the electricity that we use, some people have electric heat. But I look at this and I'm just wondering, well, first of all, I'm just going with this. So we're taking something out of Forbes.
Well, Forbes was just one example. There were multiple sources that had the same message.
And I'm okay with that. I just want to know who. I mean, if we're going to use this as an example, was this an energy expert opinion, or was this a talking point by some council committee? Was this, or just a magazine article written by a journalist who's looking at everything?
I didn't happen to catch the byline on the article, but I'll look it up for you.
I would appreciate it, because I don't want to be taking our assessments here from Forbes.
No,
With
but
all due
again, it was
respect.
multiple people around the country were making the same observation. If you home heat with gas, that's your option. SPP on energy generation, we have options that we can shift to lower cost sectors if that's going to be an issue.
But we produce electricity with gas too. So we know we're going to have the rise. And you said fuel oil. You know, if we're hedging fuel oil, why aren't we buying at the cheapest rate and filling the tanks now? You think it's gonna get cheaper?
We have been watching the market, and as we've gotten advantage of when we see a dip in the market, it's been pretty stable here recently.
Yeah.
So we're watching to see if there is a dip,
It's gonna be,
we'll buy some more.
it's gonna be 70 degrees at the end of the week. I mean, we know we're not experiencing a December or a November like we normally do.
In fact, I know we have a delivery scheduled for tomorrow.
Okay, so, well, that's good, but
So we're watching.
But if we're buying, if we're hedging, we're looking at pricing, the cheapest possible pricing, and buying the volume that we can at that price, and preparing. I mean,
one
you're
of the-
gonna use it anyway, right, Jim? So,
However, diesel number one is more expensive, so we only want to put the last portion in number one diesel. That way we can protect against the freezing, but also not be stuck with a lot of higher cost fuel.
well, I get it, but I would much rather pay a little for a little than a lot more for a little.
Certainly.
And so that's all I'm saying. That's just part of the hedging that I'd like to see us do more of, because we talked about it from the end of the storm. And when I saw the talking points, it's like, well, what did we do? Because we said we were going to be proactive about trying to plan for a potential tough winter. You know, we saw what happened in June. Nobody knew we were going to be melting in June, and Evergy was raising people's thermostats all the way from Wichita all the way up. So, you know, my thing is, Jim, I
can tell you, those units have run all summer long.
Yeah.
And we've had multiple deliveries. Every time we make an order to refill, we look at the price and make a decision on whether to fill it up to 60% or to go higher. So we're making that judgment every time we order.
And I get it, but fuel costs generally are priced from yesterday. And I can go to bed tonight and gas is $2.99, and I can go to work tomorrow and it's $2.74. It happened the other day. So all I'm saying is, you know, we look at pricing today, it's priced off of yesterday, and it's so on and so forth. So I hope we have a real aggressive stance with it, because I think that we've, not just with, and Jim, I'm going to ask you a couple questions on what you think, because forecasting, not just for our winter, but for generations. That's important to me. I know it is to you because I've heard you talk about it. What is, in your opinion, as we look forward from this winter on, as we need to plan for what we're going to do as a utility provider in the city, what do you think the most reliable, cost-effective, or let's just use the word cheap, energy that we can build and produce today? What form of energy is that? And I want you to be honest, and you can say the N-word if you need to. You're in a safe place. Because people need to hear this. I don't care if it rubs them wrong or not. The fact is, we've got to get past offending and get to the answers that the city needs to drive its utility forward.
Obviously, with my background, I like nuclear.
Thank you.
However, right now, the regulatory environment and all the legal wranglings they have to go through, the hearings, the protests, it is cost prohibitive to build one. Once you have it built, it's great. You put that at 100% power and generate for weeks. But getting to that point, you have to have some very deep pockets to absorb that cost.
But how long can a nuclear plant last?
I know my submarine reactor, the core was built to last 20 to 30 years without having to refuel.
Without having to refuel. And it produced
Every day.
effective, dependable energy that was reliable, got us all around the world, didn't it?
Got me home every time.
Well, yeah, and there's plenty of other ships that did, so I appreciate that.
Other than that, I mean, it really is, you're really talking crystal ball territory, because coal is the cheapest.
And the most plentiful.
Except, what's the regulatory environment going to look like in 10 years? What's it
Well-
going to look like in 20 years?
Well, politics, if we
We
just
don't know.
if we let politicians determine our future in energy, we're going to be sitting in the dark.
The other factor we have to consider here in Independence is our position in the Southwest Power Pool. We're in a location where there's a lot of energy around us, but there are some daily needs. There's some. Today we ran we ran our units for about 2.5 hours. We ran all four that were available, we ran for about 2.5 hours this morning. And that happens, no one would have predicted on a 65-degree day in November that we would even start up, but we ran all four.
You were called upon.
We were called upon.
Yeah.
So we're in a niche that I think that with that, you're peaking resources that can start fast, start dependably, run efficiently. If you do run for 2.5 hours, it doesn't hurt you compared to a lot of the older generation where you have to run for an extended period to make up for those startup costs. Those are the kind of things that we have to balance when we're looking at what to recommend to you all for future.
Well, I'd like to have an honest discussion on future generation and whatnot.
We always have an honest discussion.
Well, we're always scared to say the N-word, right? Nuclear is something that everybody's scared of. And I think that we got to get beyond that and start talking honestly about it. And I don't think we have to go much further than just look across the pond. Look what's going on in Europe and see how they subsidize their energy and what is subsidized, what energy they're buying. To know and understand. What is the most, I'll ask you one other question, I'll shut up. What is the most subsidized, heavily invested in energy that we have right now?
Probably your wind and solar.
Wind and solar.
They get the government rebates that
How much
others
do you
don't.
think that we've invested in wind and solar worldwide? Do you have a clue?
I don't have a clue.
I read it's approaching $2 trillion. How long would it take wind and solar to pay back $2 trillion? Just to break even before we can actually make money on it?
Quite a while.
A long time.
At a couple of megawatts per generator, it takes a while.
So do you think that when you have to subsidize so heavily and with so much, and we know that it's already in the red, that it puts a strain on the system, which means we have to buy energy when it can't keep up with the demand? And what happens to that energy cost when we have to go buy it and it's not as common as it used to be?
Well, just like any other technology, as we progress, those costs come down. And with the abundance of wind that we do have across the Midwest, it's not a bad investment.
But I'm talking about like with gas and fuel. The fact is the cost of everything else that we're beginning to shut down now is rising. Those costs are rising. Some of the prices that you're having to battle is a result of all of this highly subsidized renewable energy. And that's just the facts. Numbers don't lie. And so I commend you for trying to balance it all, and it's a difficult task. I do. I wish we could have a real honest discussion on where we need to go in terms of energy. Are we profitable this year, Jim?
We're in the black so far.
That away. That's good. Imagine that. Okay, thank you.
Other comments or questions from the council? Yes.
On the diesel that you're purchasing, what's the shelf life of that?
I honestly don't know. We try to keep from getting too much if we think it's going to sit for a long time. You do have additives, you do have sediment that's in that fuel oil that will settle down. If it sits in the tank too long without moving, you'll get some stratification, and that does change the energy content of what you're trying to burn. So we do try to keep it moving.
Yeah, speaker. I was just wondering about that. I'm assuming that we pretty much figured that prices are going up, so I was just wondering if we're filling them tanks up as soon as possible, being they're predicting a bad February.
Well, and as I said, we are, every time we order, we're making a call on how much to order and how far to push that percentage based on the prices at the time.
Yeah, one of the things kind of off the scale here, but I was reading a newsletter by one of our local lobbyist people or newspaper thing. It said that Dogwood were paying 12.3% interest.
I don't know what the interest rate is.
Okay, just kind of off the wall. We've been renegotiating all this interest on everything and bonds and everything at the power and light level, and I read that today. And Indy Energy, I believe, said that we was paying 12.3% interest in there, so kind of questioning that high rate. Kind of off the wall here, but it's still involved in the cost of electricity, so I don't have anything else.
Okay. Any other comments or questions from the council on the presentation? Okay, thank
Thank
you,
you.
Mr. Nail. Next is our public hearing. This is a full public hearing to receive input on potential increased utility costs and remedies. So if you would like to speak, if you would please come forward, state your name for the record.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, City Council. My name's Kenneth Love. Approximately 3 years ago, some that sit on this council tonight talked about Southwest Pool for energy, what it's going to cost for the next 10 years. We would stay the same. Questions was also asked, what happens if we have a bad freeze? Where are we going to get our energy from? The council replied to the citizens and the residents of Independence, we've got plenty of electricity throughout the Southwest Motor Pool. Our prices will not go up. Just a few years ago. Then leading from there, Councilman Huff brought up a situation and it passed that the residents would get a 2% reduction. Not long after that, it was another 4% reduction, so a total of 6%. People were starting to enjoy getting a little bit money back for all the years that they have overpaid to IP&L. Then, election come around, some changes were made. Changes. Let's find a way that we can get this money back from the residents. And they call it a fuel surcharge. Still to today, I have not seen an 18-wheeler, a 10-wheeler, or any type of truck back up to my house and provide me with electricity. Everything comes through the Southwest Motor Pool. I would have loved to ask some questions tonight when we had a speaker up here speaking about diesel fuel and the amount of gallons and amount of settlement that goes in this tank. I'm very well familiar with lots and lots and lots of diesels. And I know one thing is additives in the wintertime is a cheaper cost. But a lot of big trucking companies, they use heat to keep their fuel from freezing. And then when that amount of fuel, diesel fuel, number 2, comes out of the tank, it goes into a filtration system. So I'm just wondering if we got heated tanks and do we have a filtration system there? But going back to the IP&L cost and everything, so now we're here tonight, COVID's hit, people have lost and lost and lost and cannot afford what we have right now today. I was very happy to serve some families over Thanksgiving and be able to smile that I knew I was helping them because they couldn't afford the food, because the food prices are so high. Our gas prices are so high. And you're going to talk about raising electricity, the rates? Looking at government housing at their rates. if they get a little bit of an income adjustment per year, and they've been in that housing long enough, that housing complex takes that amount that they get from the state, what we would call a raise. So when you're looking and you're thinking about voting yes to improve higher rates, think about the people that are sleeping in the cold tonight. It's not that cold out there, but there's a lot of homeless people, and there's people that need help. We don't have places for these people to go in our city. And it's just going to get worse and worse and worse. I'd love to know how I can afford 12 blankets from Walmart to cover my windows, or Visqueen, or whatever it takes to heat my house. That was a bad example. For more citizens, the residents of Independence, to pull more and more and more money out of their pockets? No. Anybody that votes in favor tonight of raising the rates on the citizens of Independence, think about your position.
Hi, my name is Lowell Croft, resident here of the city. And good evening, Mayor and City Council members. Just a few things. I didn't prepare a speech for tonight, but I was a little caught off guard by the notice of the public hearing that's in progress right now, because there was almost none given. Obviously, the majority of the people in our city haven't been notified because nobody showed up. So I think you all did a very poor job of getting the word out about the public hearing. I really think there should have been a lot more effort put into that. Secondly, there's been a lot of talk going on about possibly, buying new generation to put in at the old power plant. And we are, as far as I'm concerned, we are very blessed to be a member of the Southwest Power Pool, where we are paying a very, very low rate for the energy consumption that we do here, that we consume here in the city. Building our own power plant doesn't mean that we get to choose, unless we disassociate from SPP. Building our own power plant doesn't mean we get to choose where that energy goes in the city. Our generation facilities are at the behest of Southwest Power Pool to call upon them to generate electricity and put it out on the grid. All of the electricity that we consume here in Independence is provided from SPP to us through the grid. And if we are asked to generate part of that electricity, it goes on the grid. It doesn't just automatically go into the Independence homes and businesses. So I think we need to make sure we keep that in mind. We can't afford, there's no way we can generate electricity at a cheaper price than what we pay Southwest Power Pool. So I think the council needs to bear that in mind whenever they're considering throwing out ideas like putting in a brand new generator plant at the old facility. So that's it. I just hope that if you do, I hope there's another public hearing, because this is really, really pathetic that there's only been 2 of us so far, and I'm not sure there's going to be anybody else. But I really think there should have been more effort put out there, and more effort put into what is the public hearing about. There's just vapor almost as far as what this public hearing is supposed to be about. That's it. Thank you for my time.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council, City Manager, PUAB members who are here. This is the 5th Monday that you've been here, so I don't really want to take a lot of your time. Like Mr. Croft said, I think public hearings on these topics are really, really important, because in 2 months or 3 months, you're going to have a recommendation about new generation that'll come before you, and the potential cost of that is anywhere from 120 or to 140 million. Actually, I want to pause and publicly thank Mr. Nail for the patience and his education and his time that he spends with Public Utility Advisory Board members. I think he's probably made more presentations to the city council than any city department head, and for that I thank them, because he's asked to be an engineer, an operator, economist, a forecaster, and he does the best that he can, and in some senses we're a small utility, and he does a really solid job in providing information so that we all, as ratepayers and as an owner, I am a ratepayer. I should say this, I live at 3704 Grand in Independence, Missouri. I know that's a practice I used to be in, is telling you where I live, but I want to let you know I live here. I use the energy. It's reliable. It is, and so anyway. So the significance of this, actually, I am the editor of the occasional newsletter that Indy Energy puts out. So just for purposes, I went back and looked what I said. The 12.3 was not the interest rate. The 12.3 was the city's ownership interest in Dogwood Plant. We own 12.3% of the Dogwood Plant, and so we are a fractional owner of the plant. That's not the interest rate. And next time I write about it, I'll be more clear about that's what our ownership. It's also important for me to say not only where I live, it's also important for me to say I'm a liberal arts graduate and I'm not an energy expert. But the significance of the decision that you have, it's probably going to be the city's largest capital expenditure in the city's history. Tonight is not the time to have a discussion about that project, because there's just so much that should and should be said about it all, options on what to do and how to pay for it. So I want to leave you some suggestions this evening for your consideration. One, have additional public hearings once the new generation bids have been evaluated and recommendations made. Two, make sure the Public Utility Advisory Board is fully engaged in this discussion. Three, request the city's utility financial advisor, PFM, to develop the pro forma financial statements on financing options for the anticipated cost of the project, including an evaluation of all current IPL debt. This is an important decision, and you cannot fund it without borrowing money. And we need to understand what the impact of borrowing that amount of money, a tremendous amount of capital, will have on current or future rates. A simple city council majority, 4 city council members, could commit the city to a massive project on which we will be paying long after I am gone. It would be good and appropriate to provide ample opportunities for the community to engage as they choose in sharing their thoughts and considerations on the economic, environmental considerations of this decisions. We found it important to engage the community on other issues involving city services, police, fire, pets, and other topics. Shouldn't we do it for energy, particularly for something that this is large and important? Thank you.
Is there anybody else who wants to speak on the public hearing? Okay, this brings us to council member comments. Are there any council members who wish to make any comments?
Madam Mayor.
Yeah, yes, Councilman Stewart.
So we've talked a lot about IPL tonight. I actually want to mention something about the sewer rates. I've been receiving a lot of contacts from constituents about them. So I was hoping that we could do something on a study session, kind of explain how the sewer rates work. And I've been questioned about this $12 a month that we collect. I understand it's federally mandated, but I'd like to find out what exactly it's being used for. So that's all I got. Thank you.
I guess I'll just go down the line. Councilmember Perkins, anything? Councilman Huff? Councilmember DeLucci?
Yes, I was just going to say, I attend PUAB to hear it the first time because these things are very difficult to understand. And I think that is the proper place to have a public hearing for people to ask their questions. Right now, we're on this dais and we're pretty high up. We're not really getting comment from you. You're giving us your statement, but not that question. And for us to have a conversation is in the PUAB. So I really suggest at the PUAB. Mr. Nail, God bless you. You have worked very, very hard. You have a lot of patience with people like me because it takes me a few times to understand it, and I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yes, Councilman Huff?
Councilman DeLucci, I like that idea too. I just think that we need to change the times where people that work I know the facility end of it, but I agree with you, that'd be a good thing to do, but it's the hours that's available for them. I mean, a lot of people have to work, hopefully, and 2:30 is kind of early for that. But
Well, there are, I don't know, Saturday afternoon. I've done it. I mean, it's possible. You don't do it today for next week, but you can do it today for 4 months from now. And by then, we'll have the information that people need to have in order to make a questionable decision and criticism.
Madam Mayor.
We're going the opposite direction. What happened?
Sorry.
Councilman Perkins.
Sorry to do the backflow this way.
Yeah.
Taking this discussion one more step further, would a town hall be appropriate? Casual discussion to have those give and take questions? I don't want to muddy the waters much, but maybe Mr. Schottenmeyer's right. This is going to be the biggest, longest legacy vote discussion that this city is going to have. So
Okay, I'm going to go last, but,
I just throw that out there for
Okay.
for food for thought.
yeah, thank you.
And I've got to just say, I need the information first, then I'll have my comments. And I don't want to tell people they're not invited to a public hearing for the town, but we need that information, and that's not going to happen in 1 hour. That's all. I'll be quiet.
Councilman Steinmeier.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You know, I do appreciate the discussion, and, you know, a lot of things get accomplished in government with a healthy form of skepticism. That's part of who we are. We're skeptical. We're from Missouri. We're show me, right? So I hope that people listen to even the things I say, and I hope you hold it with a healthy form of skepticism, and you want to challenge it, and you want to talk about it. I am sick and tired of us kicking this can down the road. I said that 1.5 years ago when I came in here. I want to make decisions forward-moving for this city. What's in the best interest of the generations to come who are going to call themselves residents of Independence? But at the same time, I'm concerned about the little grandmas who are trying to pay bills on a very fixed income. And for a lot of us, we don't sit and worry about that too much because we have the ability to pay our bills. Single parents, things like that. People struggle. We've come out of some hard times. It's not going to get easier anytime sooner. I agree. I hope we have multiple hearings, and I hope many people come out. I hope many people are sparked by the things that you say, I say, we all say, and that it causes a dialogue where it can give us a consensus of where we're going, because you own this utility. And all we need is a little leadership going forward to make this happen. And this was my driving force. That's part of when I went door to door, that's what people talked about, is about the utilities. They'd said it a lot. And yes, it's going to be expensive. We get it. But that doesn't give us a reason to kick this can down the road. I've listened to people criticize us who sat on council back in 2004, did nothing. I'm tired of that. I don't want to go back yesterday. I want to move forward with what we need to do today. And so if I anger somebody, upset you, cause you to think in a different way, good. My job's done. Then you come and you talk and tell us what you want and let us weigh it and do it the right way. Because without you, people like us are going to make decisions and you're going to live with them. So get involved. Let's have multiple meetings. I don't care if they're town halls, more public hearings, but we need to start putting this on the calendar and being serious about it. Each and every one of us. And so, yeah, a little more notice is good, but let's have multiple ones, not just one. Let's talk about it. Let's schedule it somewhere, somehow. Let's get it done. That's all.
Okay, Councilman Hobart?
Very briefly, thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. City Manager, Mr. Nail, thank you so much for the presentation. I appreciate the amount of time and effort that goes into it. And it is beyond our expertise, the inner workings of how the energy industry works. So thank you very much for that. I also wanted to thank the PUAB members that are here tonight. We're here in part tonight because of your recommendation, and I don't know when the last time was that I saw the city council and the PUAB doing anything sort of in a congenial or collegiate or working together way. So that's really, really refreshing from my point of view. I look forward to the PUAB doing public hearings if they can. I look forward to all the versions of town halls. I agree that one thing that we will certainly agree on at this point is that we have to have massive citizen input, even to get to the point of making a decision. Frankly, my position is that once we get recommendations or make a decision that this is a big enough decision, we probably should have a public vote on it. If we're going to bond $150 million and build a power plant that will indebt us for 50 years, I think everybody needs to weigh in on that, even if it's $50 million, and maybe that lasts for 30 years. This is too big a decision. We've all seen what's happened with Bass Pro, and while the retail market is not at all the same as the energy market, we have sitting in front of us a perfect example of a city council that made the best decision they could, but was a tragic decision ultimately. Our debt has increased on that in the 20 years that we've had it, as opposed to going down, or 10 years. So we can't be in that position very many times. Our city isn't big enough for that. So we have to be cautious and thoughtful. 100% citizens need to be involved. Ultimately, I will absolutely be asking for a vote if we're going after real big-time dollars. So thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think we've heard a lot of different ideas that are all aimed at the same thing, which is getting much more citizen input, getting expert input into these very complex issues before any council is going to make a determination on what we are going to do moving forward. And when I say we, I mean we, the ratepayers of the City of Independence, which includes all of us here tonight, I believe. So there's various different forms of doing that. Public hearing is one. Full public hearing was announced last Monday. It was certainly properly posted. I will say, in my experience in this city, that things held by and hosted by the city typically don't get the best attendance. We do have the the advantage of having these televised and recorded and posted on the website, so citizens, although they may not come and participate, have the opportunity to hear, listen, and in many cases respond to council members directly, to PUAB members perhaps. The council and the PUAB both hold the authority to hold public hearings, so I would certainly encourage the PUAB to exercise that authority as many times as necessary, and if we need to provide alternate locations at times for those to be conducted, we certainly will do that. The idea of a town hall meeting, I think what the desire is to have more of a dialogue and not so much of just a report and somebody says something and somebody listens and it doesn't really generate a discussion or a dialogue. A town hall meeting may be a good opportunity for something like that. I would suggest, though town hall meetings typically aren't hosted by the city council or even the city, those are typically hosted by other groups such as Indy Energy has had in the past some town hall meeting type of events. I can think of other organizations outside of the city who often host town hall type meetings, American Public Square type of meetings, and I think that's a very good idea. I just think we need to give some thought about how that would look, and the council really would need to, in my estimation, listen and not be up here really taking testimony, so to speak, as they do sort of in a public hearing, and certainly engage experts from our city and perhaps other industry experts in a town hall meeting to create more of an information back and forth discussion. Mr. Schondelmeyer referenced fire, police, pets. Those were things that were voted on by the voters of the City of Independence. They were tax increases. Certainly, when we're talking about potentially making this type of an investment in our city, this is the largest investment that we could potentially make. You know, there have certainly been projects in the past which perhaps should have been taken to a public vote in the form of a general obligation bond rather than a vote of the council. You know, we would just have to have a better understanding about what could potentially go to a vote of the people. This is very different than a sales tax or local use tax. When we're bonding and borrowing for this type of money, we would just need to have a better understanding about how that would look, maybe look to other communities of how they may have handled something like that, and certainly, of course, when would that take place? So I think those are all great ideas. I just, my feeling is the councils are typically, what we do is we conduct public hearings. A town hall meeting, in my view, would look a little bit different, where the council could certainly participate, but perhaps not lead that kind of discussion. I would also say, we work for you, the city manager works for you, the directors work for you. If you have questions, there's nothing to prevent you from calling them and asking those questions. I would, for the sake of efficiency, maybe go through the city manager's office first, or a council member, but if there's questions that you want asked, you know, the POAB is a resource. All of our city staff are resources to all of the citizens in this city, so please don't hesitate to use them. That was all I had. Mr. City Manager, anything else?
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Then we are adjourned.